To the town of our free rode a stranger one fine day. Hardly spoke to folks around him, didn't have too much to say. No one dared to ask his business, no one dared to make a slip. The stranger there among them had a big iron on his hip. Big iron on his hip.
All right, so there we go. Well, yeah,
I can't believe I've done this again.
Well, I mean, you know, it's you do what you got for the content, right?
Unfortunately,
The thing I wanted to do before
I'm shitty at it because I've had like 5 days where I haven't done anything, so I'm just shitty at it. I gotta get up.
Hey man, you know, it's I'm not the one saying it. That's all you.
Wait a
but...
minute. Who the hell are you? Who the hell are you?
Oh,
Why are you
right.
here?
All right. Yeah, I call me Big Iron. For those of you who knew me back in the Melee days, the early Rivals days, you might recognize me as Toes. Yeah, before we go, any brief aside on that particular tag. It's not. I've been asked so many times. No, it is not a fetish. It's it's a reminder. So
Was it a thing where it's just like wholesome beforehand, but because of everything now and everyone is so super saturated that it's now become this?
look, I mean, all you can call it whatever you want. The reason, okay, that what I had in my head when I chose that tag was, you know, I was playing, yeah, dirty Melee player here, but back in like 2015 when I came up with it, I was like, you know what, like, man, you get punished really hard as Captain Falcon if you do not space your neutral air on shield. Any of the top 8 characters, they've got an option to punish you, and it is not fun. You lose your stock. So I started to really try to dial in. I'm like, all right, I've got to space my neutral air well. So I came up with the tag Toes to remind me when I was playing, hey, like whenever you use that neutral air, always space it so that the very tip of Falcon's toes are hitting the shield and nothing else, right? But you know, obviously, like, you know, I don't go by Toes anymore. I've been playing around with a couple of different tags. I settled on Big Iron because I unironically like the song, and more than that, I love the memes. So
All right.
here we are. A little bit about me. Started with Melee. Well, actually, I mean, I started casually with 64, and then looking up how to do combos for 64, I came across the Smash Doc, so Doc Kid here. That got me into Melee back in the 2014-2015 timeframe. And then I happened to connect with a guy who was a bigger TO in the Chicagoland area. He hosted like the biggest Smash Fest in that area, and so we had people out from every scene at the time. Project M players were showing up, Melee guys were showing up, and then especially Smash 4 guys were showing up because he was one of the main TOs for Smash 4 at the time. But yeah, and by proxy of that, I ended up getting introduced to the broader Smash scene, and I won't name the school that I was the TO for, but I ended up kind of inheriting the position of the main TO at the school that I was at the time for college, and I hosted mainly Melee and Smash 4, but once in a while we got into some Smash 64, and that was around the time I discovered Rivals. I've got like way more hours in Rivals than I ever thought I would end up having. At this moment, it's like what, 16,670 some odd hours. But I mean, part of the reason I played it so much.
I agree with that notion because, like, I think before I started doing competitive Rivals, I had like 500 hours, and I'm like, I don't even know how I did this.
Yeah, it was, well, for me, because I don't know if any of you students out there are experiencing this.
No, no, WAFFLEMAN, no, WAFFLEMAN, go away. No, go away.
Or don't.
You gotta go away this time. You go to the general. Go to general.
Well, goodbye, I guess.
I will talk to you later.
Sorry. I'm sorry, WAFFLEMAN.
It's called the podcast area. Why would you?
I mean, hey, it could get interesting. It could get spicy. You know, I'm kind of maybe another time.
Another time.
Sorry, WAFFLEMAN. But no, yeah. My heart goes out to any of those college students who are still out there on the struggle bus, because like some colleges that have like, I guess, a limited budget for their Wi-Fi or whatever, they started introducing things where it's like, all right, like, what are the most popular student apps? Well, you know, I mean, back in 2015 at least, like a lot of the Google apps, Discord, I don't think was really that big yet, but Steam certainly was that big. The PlayStation Network was that big. Xbox Live was that big. So all of these apps that like any kind of pings or whatever, they basically target them and say, all right, reduce dramatically the amount of bandwidth that these apps can pull, making a lot of like online games on Steam at the time unplayable, except for one. Rivals of Aether, with its little pixelated graphics and just, didn't have to render as much stuff, didn't have to load as much stuff, even with that delayed base netcode back then, was just small enough, and its player base was just small enough that, guess what, I could still boot the game up and easily get very playable online matches. And so, yeah, I put a ton of hours into it at the time because Slippy didn't exist back then, and Lord knows I wasn't about to make any attempt of running Anther's Ladder on the connection that I had as a college student. So yeah, a lot of that 1,600 hours comes from those years where I was still at school and just, stuck with this limited bandwidth. But all that to say, dabbled a little bit with the competitive scene for Rivals of Aether, went to a couple of tournaments, kind of hit that threshold of like, all right, like I either keep going with this and really make an earnest attempt at going competitive with it, or I back off of it. And that was right around the time after Shovel Knight had come out, and we were on the precipice. I think news had come out about the Workshop 4, and my experience with the game ultimately ended up informing me to kind of not go any further with it. But we'll get into that in a little bit. So yeah, that's all that to say, like, I guess my main interest when it comes to the platform fighting games, both indie and, yeah, Smash Brothers, still, is just, my hope would be, and I hope other TOs would have the same philosophy. I know some do, I also know that others don't, would be to do everything that you can to make sure that the scene is welcoming, that the community around the game is welcoming, but also that the game itself, for our part, insofar as the rule set goes, insofar as making calls about how the game is played and the degree to which we influence that, making sure that the game is an enjoyable experience.
Which we will definitely talk about later.
Yeah, from the top to the bottom, right? It should be fun for people who are coming into the game and thinking about going more competitive with it, but it should also, to the extent that it's possible, be enjoyable for the people who are at the top level, right? Playing at the very highest degree of skill that there is for it. And then in conjunction with that, the longevity, right? Like, I can't speak so much for Smash Brothers nowadays because it seems like just around the time that discussion of how much longer will this scene go on comes up, there's a new title on the horizon that comes out, and it seems like there's a big shift, right? You don't hear so much about the Smash 4 competitive scene for anything nowadays, save for, I guess, the recent Coinbox, which was like the last one after they shut the servers down.
Oh
You don't really hear
yeah,
about
I
Brawl.
love double Sonics and Grand Finals.
Yeah, we'll get to that too. But I mean, that's my main focus, right? And that's kind of undergirds a lot of my philosophy. Is like, let's keep the game fun, let's keep the game going, right? If there is a valid case for the game to keep going, I think Melee is something that definitely influences that perspective. But again, one thing at a time. So, and now, how did I find out? I mean, so, and this kind of touches into it. So the reason I found out about Neos here. I saw your video on Minecraft Steve and kind of the discussion around like, should he be banned, should he not be banned? And I mean, I can say from the perspective of somebody as a TO that there's actually, would you like to touch a little bit on like your whole thought process on like the ban? Just briefly touch back on some of the points in that video of like the ban from the perspective of like a TO and why a TO would think about banning Steve.
So so I don't remember everything about the video, but I still do have my.
Well, I do. That's part of the reason I'm asking. But
yeah, but I do know some of the points that I bring up about Steve, and the problem, and I think the problem with Steve was definitely just like, and I talked about it especially compared to other people, and it was really the sort of degenerative play style that happens.
Yeah.
That happens because simply his character exists. And I guess the problem that I have was that like a lot of people, especially at the time, were comparing it to sort of characters where it's like they could do it too. But the problem is that they don't really get a lot of the benefits that Steve does by just existing. So it's like a big video, and I forgot the video. I'll put it up, but like the big video defending Steve was like, yeah, well, Samus and Sonic could do these things too, so why do you consider that? And I'm like, yes, but the problem is that when Steve is zoning you and he's putting blocks around you, not only do you need specific moves that characters probably, a lot of characters don't have like one hit in order to beat it. Not only that, but he gets stronger because of mining. So like when you're spin dashing or like you're saving charge for Samus,
Yeah,
it's not that
that's
you're
right.
getting stronger, and not only that, but the expended resource is just not there. And I don't know
Yeah.
whether I talked about it in the video, but I think I brought up, or maybe I didn't, I don't know. But I think I brought up the fact that if melee people could see that degeneracy is included in something like wobbling, then it would only make sense, especially since Bayonetta and Meta Knight exist, it would only make sense that you ban him because
Yeah.
he would qualify compared to these competitors. Now,
Certainly. And I think, speaking to the situation from a TO's perspective, I think it's very interesting that a lot of the positions, and I don't want to get too lost on Minecraft Steve here. It's
mhm,
why we should ban Minecraft Steve 2.0. But no, I think that, it's interesting to me that a lot of the discussion tends to come from, of course, people who play the character, which is understandable enough. I mean, I wouldn't want my character to get banned, especially if I was, getting solid results with him or just even enjoying playing him either. But I do think that like it's interesting that a lot of it revolves around results and the fact that like, oh well, we don't have Minecraft Steve necessarily dominating the scoreboards. He is not utterly overrunning the scene, and he's not always winning, right? So clearly there are characters that can beat him. Clearly there are holes in his defense, and to that I think one of the things that needs to come into the discussion anytime you're discussing something as drastic, because it is a drastic action. I mean, banning a character, right? This is an instance of a community, the competitive scene around the game coming together and kind of making a decision that may very well go against the grain of the people who made the game, right? I think any situation where you're banning characters, especially DLC characters, you're not making any friends over at Nintendo by doing that number. That is for darn sure. But I think that you need to consider, well, first off, you need to consider like, okay, what about the character is causing discussion for ban, of course. And secondly, like how accessible are these tools, right? This was the big thing that Hungrybox got hung up on that I think resulted in him banning Minecraft Steve for his tournaments. Is it's like how strong are the tools and how accessible are they, right? And then what do they look like at like, okay, you're kind of getting the hang of the character versus maybe a more optimized level. And that's been something that I know a lot of people in the community have talked about. Tweet Talks as well as Lights Out, the two biggest podcasts, they certainly discuss this often as like, all right, like how optimized is Steve? And it seems the consensus, and granted, they are biased against Steve, obviously, but the consensus does seem to be that the character is quite unoptimized, right? There are quite a few things that could be dialed in even further, and that if the day ever comes that we see that, it'll be 20 out of 20XX, I guess you could say it would be 20 block, but I mean, from my position, and this may seem more strict, but I think when you understand the idea of keeping a competitive scene together for the purposes of longevity and also for the purposes of like growing it, you'll understand a little bit more the logic behind a ban. And my whole take on it was always like, I don't think that a character needs to be as dominant as Meta Knight or Bayonetta necessarily to come up for the discussion of ban, although I think that would prompt a discussion for a ban. I think that what you need to do is, as a community, you really need to have the discussion of like, all right, like what qualities do we appreciate in Smash Brothers or a platform fighter, right? Do we value the skill set that, because there is a skill set, right, around like putting down the blocks and farming up, keeping people out, right? That's a skill set. Zoning, that's a skill set. Playing aggressively, that's a skill set. Or is there some kind of collaboration between all of these skill sets that we value? And if that is the case, are there skill sets within that paradigm that perhaps we value more than others? Because at the end of the day, like the question and the word degenerative, right? I think people fixate on that and think like, oh man, like camping is degenerative, right? It's boring. It makes the game miserable to play. It kills like spectators. It's like, I mean, those are all potentially true, but I would look at it more in the sense of like, well, what about this? Like, is it invalidating or is it standing in contrast to a style of play or even a set of skills that seem to still be valid? They seem to still exist in a meritable way at a top level across the entire cast of the game, otherwise than this one character. And they seem to be something that the community has celebrated historically and has valued prior to this DLC character coming onto the scene. Do those skills and the value and what they contribute to the scene outweigh the loss, because there will be a loss, of banning this character and the players that will maybe stop playing the game competitively if we do that. And I think for myself, the answer is yes. Now, again, like full bias, I acknowledge my bias as a Melee player and having primarily started competitively in that background. But in your video, and I think you already hinted at it in your video on the ban for Minecraft Steve, like in Melee, you know, and granted, it's a different situation, right? We don't receive patches, we don't receive DLC updates, and so Melee is a different beast entirely from Ultimate and Smash 4 and really any platform fighter that comes down the pipeline in the future. But, you know, in absence of any support from the developer and in absence of any patches, like, we took a hard look at wobbling, and it was not an easy decision, right? This was something that came over the span of years. But in the end, the conclusion was, yeah, I mean, this is a degenerative element to the game. You have an ability where if you get a single grab, you can remove a stock, right? Guaranteed, virtually. It's not an immensely massive technical skill set that needs to be learned to do this. If you get good enough at this and, you know, adjust for the stage banning and the other elements of the rule set, you know, it's a pretty plausible thing to get extremely high results and upset like the standing meta in a pretty massive way if you optimize this, right? And we began to see that during the timeline, the couple of years that led up to the wobbling ban.
I think what makes that even more interesting is that wobbling didn't have much investment compared to a lot of moves that do a lot of damage in Melee.
Yes.
Even for Jigglypuff's rest, when you don't get it, at least that's a kill.
Well, and yeah, there's a lot at stake. There's a lot at stake with arrest, and you know, there's a lot at stake for the rest of the cast, like the interactions that you have versus like the risk of, well, if I shield at the right time, if I'm under the platform at the right moment, and they mess up on a drop through or a slide off or whatever it may be, I know I can get a grab here, and if I get a grab here, guess what? I can optimize that into a stock, and now it's a matter of camping. They have to approach me. And via the necessity of approaching me, guess what? They're playing right into the game plan of being at very high risk for getting grabbed yet again. So, I mean, you see over time, and it's not immediately apparent, right? Because again, wobbling was present as far back as well before 2013 when Melee first made it onto the big stage at EVO, and lo and behold, the wobble inventor, Wobbles himself, made it into the top 8.
Back when you guys had like wobbling compilations, and you're like, that's funny as hell.
Lord. Yeah, I mean, it's really a bummer because wobbling often shines in the face of like handoffs, which are actually a really sick, at least I think, combo paradigm that can exist. But again, like I digress. To not spend too much time on Melee, like, you know, another example, ledge grab limit, right? Like, again, it's one of those things where as the meta develops and people are optimizing every conceivable way to win at any cost, you know, these things come into the forefront of discussion and they come under the looking glass a little more carefully. And you begin to look at it and it's like, well, again, like, at least for Melee, right, the value is not on how well you can avoid interacting. Like, at the end of the day, this is a fighting game. We value the attributes of how well you handle, like, decision-making in tight spots. And that necessitates interaction, right? That even camping, although it is less interactive and has obviously come into the equation, like, is not something that can be executed as flawlessly as you can when there is no ledge grab limit, and certain characters can abuse this to a high degree. So again, like, we curb that. And again, this is all like, if you think about like
what's it called? Hungry Box versus Ally definitely proves that.
There are other matches that come to mind that just really exemplify how degenerative this whole thing got just before the ban was introduced. And so, I mean, but it all comes down to like, there is a skill set in Melee that community values, and that skill set does revolve around decision-making in tight quarters under the pressure of time, and you know, sometimes you make the wrong decision, but the question is always, well, how can you bounce back, like, even in the instance of a bad decision, right? And hopefully, like, it's not a situation where every time you make a bad decision, like with wobbling, you're instantly placed into a checkmate position, right? We don't want there to be, it's not a good sign if your game has a plethora of characters, or even a handful of characters, or one character that has this option where that you're immediately put in checkmate. And it's at a very low execution of skill, it's very low risk, and they can more or less abuse it perpetually throughout a match. Like, that's not a good sign for the development of the game. So ultimately, to bring it back around to Ultimate, and sorry we were on Melee for so long, but I use the examples that I'm most familiar with, right, as a TO. I guess former TO at this point, but yeah, I mean, you know, to bring it back to Ultimate, the Ultimate community And even if they don't, right? Even if they play the same old game that they did with Smash 4 with Brawl, I will give the Brawl community the exemption, the benefit of the doubt, because I mean we had never seen anything like Meta Knight prior to that character coming into the equation. In the case of Bayonetta, though, there is really no excuse. But I will paint the picture for why I think this happened in Smash 4, and I think I have a pretty good understanding as a TO the reason behind why it's happening in Ultimate. And here's the reason, right? I mean, there are entities, TOs, community organizers, and leaders in every platform fighter and Smash game that I think have the best interests of the community at heart for the purposes of longevity, but also for the purposes of making sure that we keep the skill set that we like the most, that we enjoy the most, that we want to see shine in our game, persist. And the thing is, like, people say, oh, that's discriminatory. And it's like, well, we're already being discriminatory, right? We've already made the decision long ago to nix items, right? We don't have any items in the game. We operate on a very specific clock, so like there is a timer in play. And we've already nixed a large plethora of stages from being present in competitive play. So by these decisions alone, you can already tell that, yes, we do value a certain skill set. Yes, there are certain things that we allow for in the competitive scene and things that we don't allow for. So if the argument is, oh, well, don't ban the character because that's discriminatory, it's like, well, we are already making discriminatory decisions for the purposes of creating a competitive scene and a competitive skill set that aligns with the things that we value the most. So, again, this needs to come down to a bit more thorough an examination, I think.
And I think the big thing that we're probably not saying is really, and it'll probably have its own can of worms, but basically, because you filter in a sort of thing that you appreciate, you now get something that is fun to you, right? So now
Yeah,
this is more of how is this degrading the fun of the game? Which I think is
precisely.
gonna be the main idea of this thing.
And fun is, I mean, people will. I mean, we can get into this a little later, but fun is more important, I think, than a lot of people realize. Every competitor, no matter how algorithmic they may be in their thought process towards the game now, or how much they value a competitive result now in favor of like even their And I can't speak for everybody, but I can say that like in the end, rivals kind of playing it at a competitive level or dialing in on ranked in the master class for whatever characters I was playing, like, or in tournament, like it did get to this point where it's like, all right, like I'm doing this, and it's not even a decision that I necessarily detected in myself, but there is some line along the way where you start to play the game and it's like, man, this is fun. I love the movement, the whatever it may be. The combos are sick, the characters are sick. I love this character. I love what they can do. I want to discover more, right? And so much of what you're doing, at least in my experience, when I look back at Rivals, was for fun. Like it was like, I just love this game. I want to learn more about it. Somewhere along the line in the competitive pursuit and enjoying the game, there's this line or this boundary that was crossed into, well, oh wow, I'm getting results. I beat, Ralph, who I think was one of the top, if not the top Orcane at the time. Or, oh, I got a game off full stream, right? And pre definitive edition release, and even immediately after, that was still like, a pretty significant result for anybody who's taking Rivals seriously. But then, like, you begin to cross into this territory of like, oh, like the games matter more, right? Because pride is on the line, or like my reputation, or all of a sudden, like the results matter more, and so you look at the game differently, right? Like the enjoyment factor. Not to say that it isn't still there in some way, but it kind of gets pushed to the side. You start thinking about like what combo would look the coolest or what combo could be the most fun, and you start thinking more about, well, what combo is optimal, like what combo will just always kill in this situation, because that's the nature of competitive game. It's inevitable that like you will push the game to that limit, and any conceivable strategy that can be employed to win in the game is employed, regardless of whether or not it is an enjoyable strategy or anything else. And that doubles down even more when you get into something like esports and there's big money on the line. But I mean, people will do this just for the purpose of pride, like just for the purpose of clout. And somewhere along the way, you look back at it, at least I did, and I realized, yeah, this is not fun anymore. This is not
I think
enjoyable. And that's not to say that it couldn't be, because I
I
think
I,
there's a world where it could have been.
I agree, and I think what makes it more apparent and I guess we're gonna have to talk about it later, but I think that's kind of and what makes it worse is when you play other games and then it finally clicks why.
Yep.
Because
Mhm.
like again, And this is probably gonna be like a gas moment for the audience, but like I don't I don't love Rivals of Aether, or at least Rivals One. I like it a
Yeah.
lot, but I don't love it. And the reason why I liked it so much was not out of true love. It was like apathy for Smash Ultimate at the time. You know, it
Yeah.
didn't have the. I don't like the fusion thing where it's like you can you know like a jumping aerial you can toggle it and it like mess with every single button. I didn't like the
Yeah.
input delay. I didn't like the fact
Yep.
that a lot of the tech from Smash 4 was gone. You know, so like
Oh
when
yeah.
I came to the definitive edition mode for Rivals, it wasn't out of like love for trying to love something new. It was out of apathy, I guess. So
Yeah.
what made it worse is that the 500 hours went by, the 1,000 hours went by. You start playing with your friends. You love this game so much, and then you try something else, and then you try another thing, and then you try another thing, and then some
Yeah.
of the sort of some of the sort of headaches that you have in the
Yep.
game that you kind of excuse are kind of put on for full display. And I guess we
Yeah.
could talk about it with, the recent video that was privated, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, I do want to get into that. One last thought on and just briefly to touch on Ultimate. I'm sorry, like there's so many games that all have something to say. They all have something to contribute to this conversation. I'm just trying to briefly touch on each of them. But hey, if it goes a little long, it goes a little long. What needs to be said needs to be said. But to finish up with my thoughts on Ultimate and the whole situation with Minecraft Steve and some of the other DLC characters, I think that it's like, okay, well, we've had Bayonetta, we've had Meta Knight. Not all, but there are a lot of organizers and big figures within the competitive scene right now who were present for all of that. And so, how is it that a ban has not gone through? How is it, at least, that the decision that for those of us who can see it, we believe to be the best for the longevity of the scene and also the enjoyment of the scene, how is it that this decision has not been made yet? And I'll tell you why. And I think it's the same reason why we ended up with the situation around Bayonetta. With Bayonetta, a lot of people will say, oh, well, Bayonetta wasn't banned because, Smash Ultimate was right around the corner. Why ban a character when the game will just be kind of left behind? We're all going to move on. But there's another story there, and that story is one of TOs recognizing that top players are picking up the character. There is controversy around the character. It's one of those twisted things where in the mind of a TO, like in the short span, they see, like you go onto YouTube and it's kind of an algorithmic view, but you just look at like the videos that are trending the most results and it's like, oh wow, like this Bayonetta is really causing quite a stir. Why on earth would we ever ban a character that's causing this much viewership? And so the bottom line, right? Because the fact is, a lot of TOs do make decisions governed primarily by this. And at some level, you have to. I would never say, oh, like we need to throw money in sponsorships and whatever else, endorsements out the window, all for the sake of like the longevity of the scene. However, the question at some point along the line has to be asked is it's like, how much do we value this scene and its competitive elements lasting on for a longer time, and then how much do we value the bottom line right now, today, this year, more? I can tell you right now that for the TOs that like kept Bayonetta in the equation for Smash 4, certainly the bottom line was on their mind, and unfortunately they ended up paying a price. Not the ultimate price, pun intended, but they did end up paying a price at that, what was it, Evo 2019, I believe, where we had the infamous duo Bayonettas and Grands. And it's the same. And the thing is, I look at Steve, I look at the DLC situation with Ultimate now, but especially Minecraft Steve, I see the precise same situation, and I see the precise same decision making. I think there are a lot of TOs, a lot of organizers and big figures, sponsors within Smash Ultimate right now who recognize that, hey, you know what, this game will not last forever. It may be another Smash game. It may be maybe not a Smash game even necessarily. I think there are some people who hold out more hope for that now than ever. With Rivals 2 around the corner. How likely that is, I don't know. But at the very least, they are treating the game very much with the mindset of like, this game will not be around forever. The competitive scene will not be around forever. The new thing will come out and everybody will move over to that new thing.
We gotta
So
collect this bag.
we got to get that green, man. We got to cash in while there is a cash in to be had, or a cash out rather, right? We've cashed in. It's time to cash out. And the way to cash out is, yeah, we don't ban the character because it's creating drama, right? The whole the fiasco going on with like the Japanese scene being so dominant and Acola being the #1 player in the competitive scene, and you know, all of the drama, all of the stuff that's going on, it is driving up views to a certain extent. And there are people who obviously, especially with the most recent results, Kagoriyuki or whatever that's either an anime character or the name of the tournament over there in Japan, I don't know which, but this most recent tournament where like one of their top Snake players did finally clutch out the win, and it wasn't Minecraft Steve. There were so many comments in that Rister Mice video, to get a little more specific on who posted it. Not that I think that's an issue. Kudos to him for putting out the content and trying to help the scene in the way that he can. But there were so many comments that were entirely revolving around, well, thank God it's not Steve. And it's like, I mean, so clearly it is driving up like drama and views and like the bottom line for now. But again, the decision is not being made thinking about like, well, what will it be like next year? What will it be like in 2 years? What if the new Smash game just ends up being Smash Ultimate Deluxe with virtually no balancing or adjustment of the patches or any nerfs for Steve? What if it's just the same game with a brush up, right? Like, is this the healthiest thing for the competitive scene if that ends up being the case, right? And we just get more Ultimate. And from my position as a TO, looking back on the history of experience that I had in Smash 4 and in Melee, I think the answer is no, right? It is not the best thing for the scene going forward in the long run, but it is making some people a little bit more money right now. And that's not to say that that's every TO, but it is, I think, a couple of people for sure.
We'll get on to the next topic after this, but I think my problem with it is that, but it's also the fact that I feel like that's kind of like disrespecting potential things that can happen in the future with your games, you know? If you just
Yeah.
say, well, the next game is going to come out, why even fix this game or why even try to have any input on this game? And
Yeah.
it's like, well, the decisions that you could make right here, right now, could be determinant on if this game wants to be played in the future or how this is
Yeah.
going to work or like how tech resolves because of this issue, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I
So it's
think
like
about
putting that down because oh, it's not gonna matter. It's like it might matter to someone, you know.
yeah, I mean, and well, and I think you look at the timeline that exists before. I won't even say before Steve came out, but I think before people started discovering the tech and before people started figuring out, all right, like this character is maybe a lot more broken than we ever believed that he was. You know, even in that timeline, you've got an interesting story where like there's some not top tier characters, some middle tier characters, some characters in other parts of the cast who are showing up in top eights, and that still is happening, right? You will always have your specialists who are actively trying to optimize the game plan for that character, even if other people at the top level are not. And you know, you see some results like that, but I think there was a lot more of them. Whereas like nowadays, I mean, Japan aside, because Japan is just perhaps the biggest outlier in the entire competitive scene with the way that that community runs and operates for Ultimate specifically. But if you look at the global scene, which would include everybody from, you know, Argentina to Europe to, of course, America, and of course, Japan is a part of that also, even if they are running the scene at the moment. Um, it's like, well, I mean, your top eight per the average, especially if it's not in Japan, they're seeing a short list of characters. We got a game with like 80 plus some odd characters in it, and you're seeing maybe 5 of them, you know, or less, more likely 3, 4 maybe in a top 8. It's not a good look. And again, not to say that that's the final word and like whether or not a band should go forward, but it is something that you need to consider, and especially looking at like, okay, like if the meta is now going to be determined on how well your character does against this very particular couple of characters at the top level, well, immediately you're nixing a huge portion of your chart, and you're who knows what the future could hold, right? If Smash Ultimate scene were to continue forward in the future competitively, there's all sorts of things that are possible. I mean, again, using Melee as an example, and full bias because that's where I started, but we went, gosh, I mean, we're coming up on 23 years since the game came out, and we went probably a solid 20 or 19 of those years looking at Donkey Kong as a joke. This character is the bottom of the bucket. There is no way anybody is ever going to get any kind of major results with him. There's no way he's ever competitively viable. But guess what? Like, we've had the privilege, I would say, the luxury of a game that is not being fiddled with. There is no outside influence on it. There are no patches, really, Slippy aside, and there's nothing to like rebalance or shift the characters. So the meta is very much fixed. Guess what? Here we are, the last 3 years. There's been a revival, and all of a sudden, Donkey Kong is a lot better than people thought he was. They're getting results with him. You know, Junebug is getting just outside of like he's what, top 64 in like one of the biggest tournaments. It was Big House like a couple of years back that he got like top 64 with Donkey Kong, if not higher. You know, all of these things are happening. Well, why? Because people are putting in the time, they're labbing the character out. And as it turns out, there's still new discoveries to be had in this darn near 23-year-old game, which is unbelievable. You know, everybody, even speaking as somebody from inside the scene, the top 8 characters that are in this game, Falcon, Peach, formerly Ice Climbers, of course, Fox, Falco, Sheik, Marth. You know, we've looked at these characters for so long, and it's like these are the only characters you're ever going to see in a top 8. You know, forget whoever else is out there, right? So to see, and didn't quite break top 8, but to see a Donkey Kong get within like potential touching distance is unbelievable. That is earth-shattering for a meta in a game that is as old as ours. Who knows? Like, if Ultimate were to continue on and have, you know, the bans in place and maybe a few other rules brought in for like their current rule set, who knows what sort of possibilities are on the table for the rest of the cast and the people who really care about those characters and want to see those characters be able to pull some stuff off. But I digress. We've talked too long about Ultimate as it is. We need to get on to what are we trying to get on to here?
The old wounds.
Oh gosh. Yeah, we got to get on to I think Rivals. You know,
Why
and
you
I
gotta do
think
this to me, man? Why you gotta do this to me? You just hate
listen,
me?
it's
You just don't like me?
look, I'll just say in advance, I think that like you know, as we carry on with all this stuff, it's important to keep in mind that like, you know, I think everyone comes to their game with a different perspective, right? Me being a TO, you know, that's just in my system at this point. Like any platform fighting game or even fighting game that I look at, you know, I'm always looking at it through the lens of a TO. I'm always thinking about, well, how can we make sure that the game is, if the game is good, it's going to be fun, but how can we make sure that it stays fun? And then also how can we make sure that it sticks around a while, that it's got some legs on it, you know? And I mean, there's that perspective. Of course, there's also the perspective of somebody who's what I would call a spectator, right? Because I think to be a spectator of these games, you also have to play the game, and you probably have to at least dabble a little bit in the competitive elements of that game, right? To understand at least a little bit of what's going on whenever you're watching a top 8. So I think there certainly is the scene of spectators, and you know they have a whole view, a system of values that they have to the game. You've got casual players who are just playing it to have a good time. You know, they've got a system of values that they're bringing to the table, and of course there's the competitive players, right? The people who are, you know, playing the game as seriously as the people who are in the top 100, or they are actively trying to be the people in the top 100, or maybe they're the top 10, top 3, top 1 player. You know, and they obviously have a perspective on the game that is very much conditioned and colored by that perspective. And it's important to remember, hey, you know what? All of these people and even the content creators, you know, who are somewhere in between all of it, you know, all of these perspectives do have something that, you know, they're bringing to the table, something they enjoy about the game, and it's worthwhile to keep up in the spirit of forum. Like, all right, like, well, let's have a look at that thing that you value, the thing that's important to you, and let's examine, you know, what really is at stake here and how it plays out if we go with what you say or if we go another way, right? And I think just trying to, I mean, salt is going to happen, right? A lot of people value these games deeply, and for some people, their community of friends and a lot of the connections that they have came from these games, and so that's no small thing. That's an important thing, right? That is valuable, and I think some of them, especially in the case of like Ultimate, but even Rivals, for some players, I think, who are looking at Rivals 2 with skepticism and caution, like they feel that the scene that they've gained so much merit out of and so much community out of and so much enjoyment for the game, they feel that that is threatened with the changes that are on the horizon, the things that could be coming down the pipeline. And that's, I think, part of the reason why some of them are being as defensive as they are, because it's not just the game that's at stake or even necessarily you know, the changes in the new game that are coming along. It's, hey, like all of these things that I value, the skill set that I value, the characters that I value, the community that I value is potentially being threatened here, and I don't want to see that all of these good things that I got from that go. And that is valid. So I think, you know, it's important to season the conversation with a little bit of
I think you're gonna you're gonna have to give them at least a little background of what happened, and then we can really explain this.
Well, should I do that or do you want to do that? I mean, after all, you know,
It doesn't. I'll do it. I don't care. I'll do
I
it.
mean, I'll say it in so many words. Well, no, I've been talking forever. You say it. You say it. I'm
Okay, so
getting
it's
the only
like
person talking.
So it's like, and when I say this, I'm not. No, fuck, no, that's not my style. Yeah, I made a very bad video. Like a week, was it a week and a half ago? I don't fucking know.
Like
But basically, it
two
was
weeks
talking
ago.
about. Oh, it was 2 weeks ago. Okay, so damn, I'm slacking in content. I'm ass. No wonder they said that shit.
No worries. It's we're getting into
No,
it. We're
it's
getting
okay.
into it. It's all right.
No, it's okay. So basically, I was talking about why I don't like Workshop 4, and it really had a lot to do with a lot of things that I experienced when I played Rivals at the time. And I was, and I'll put it up. I'll put like the reaction in there. But clearly, a lot of stuff that I said were very wrong, especially when it came to like hitboxes, especially when it came to like neutral in that game. The reason why I said a lot of the things, especially when it comes to camping in that game, is because that's kind of how I was that's kind of how like everyone like played against me whenever I came into like Rivals. I think the only
Yeah.
time when I legitimately like had people play in that sort of way was when I went to like big tournaments like Genesis or something like that, when people actually played like that. But when it came to like my locals, when it came to like me playing against like MC and them, it's like it's kind of the same. Like I stand on this corner and I stand on this corner, I throw my shit out,
Yep.
and then I bait with like a
Yep. Yep.
parry, and then it's just like that was kind of my experience. Now,
Yeah.
when I say this, I mean this genuinely. I was wrong in a lot of those things,
Hmm.
and like I don't even need to say all of them. You can clearly see in the video that I put up, but it's like there's a lot that I got wrong, and there's a lot that I just didn't understand. But it did give me some introspective, and it did give me a lot of thing. It did give me a lot of time in order to figure out what actually was the reason why I didn't like Rivals. But I'm gonna put that in. But we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
And I think what this correlates with you is that
Hmm.
the reason why the is that playing Rivals of Aether is not fun in the way that I've known platform fighters for a long time. And I kind of use the veil of like shitty design and camping in order to just not actually say the reason. It's just something else entirely. But
Yeah.
basically, it's like what you said beforehand, where it's like these two perspectives are kind of like clashing, and it's not really saying the quiet part out loud, where it's like one person has a feeling and it's there, but it's clouded in this kind of like misjudgment or
Yeah.
lack
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
information, and then the other side, it's like the information is there, but we're not getting to really that side to regardless. So I can talk
Yeah.
about the actual reasons why I don't think Rivals 1 is as fun, and why it has implications for Rivals 2, because you already know we'll talk about the recent video that came out. But I made a shitty video. A lot of it is wrong. I think Big Iron will say a few of the things that rung a chord with him, but like there was a lot that I got wrong, but there were some things that I don't believe that I was wrong at, but to keep the peace and to not like to not bitch. I was
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
well, we
Stirring up
can
the
we could
pot again.
yeah, I'd rather not stir up the pot when it's kind of like I've already been that degree of wrong. And I guess we'll
Right.
talk about
Yeah.
it today. So, yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, the thing, like, if you, and this is true of any game, right? Like, if you're looking at it through a competitive lens, you're there are certain things with a game when you're looking at it through a competitive lens that are going to be pretty dramatically different from the lens of somebody who is a spectator. So that would be like a middling player or a casual player, or sometimes, although a little more rarely, I'd like to think, if the community is in good conversation with itself. But occasionally, the views of a competitive player will butt heads with the views of the TO for a tournament. I don't think that has happened too often with Rivals of Aether, and that's to their credit. But I do think, as somebody who's put in 1,600 hours into the game, and who kind of got to that line where it's like, all right, if I continue with this, I will have to start seriously implementing the paradigm and operation of somebody who is playing the game competitively. And I came to that line, dipped my toe in on the other side, and immediately decided that I did not like it. And I mean, there are a couple of reasons for that, but ultimately, what it boils down to is it's like, I think I had the realization for myself in that situation that Rivals of Aether at the highest level, right, the competitive level, the optimized type stuff, or the people who are trying to optimize their stuff, because I know a lot of it is still not yet fully optimized, is not an enjoyable experience. And for me, like where I was at is it was getting murky, because you can cross that line and not even know it if you're really making a bid at going into a scene competitively. And I kind of reflect on my time in Melee under that lens too, because I no longer play. I still play Melee, but I'm not trying to go at it, with the hyper competitive mindset that I have, like I was back whenever I attended like Rubicon. I forget which Rubicon it was in Chicago, but it was the one that Wizrobe attended. Um, but I mean, when you approach that, it's like, okay, like, is the game? I got into this game, I played this game, and I started playing it competitively, middling competitively, right, taking it a bit more seriously, trying to learn combos and DI and such, because it was fun. Bottom line, like the experience of playing the game was fun. And certainly that was true for me with Rivals in the early days, the pre-definitive edition days before Ori and Shovel Knight came out. I mean, I still had fun even after Ori and Shovel Knight came out, but I began to notice that the experience, there was something about the experience that was a little different at that time with the way the feel of the game was. And then leading up to the Workshop 4 and certainly before it and well after it too, I play the game now and it's just like, this is I don't know what it was necessarily with the early days of the game that made it such a blast, but I know that this right now, what it is now, is not it, for me at least. And I think that like I was at a point when I was dipping my toe on the other side where it's like, well, but I'm getting results, and if I push a little harder, I might even be able to, before we had people making, I don't want to call it Smurf accounts, but you can say like multi-mastering, like multiple of the entire cast, like our top players have like the entire cast at master class or the highest rank for that respective character, and it's the same guy playing them. Before we hit that level of saturation in our ranked, I was kind of thinking like, man, this is, getting results is fun, and like, getting the clout of like being one of the top, one of the very best at your character, maybe just the very best in your scene or your circle, right? Like that's something that you enjoy, getting respect, and people are having conversations about it and diving deeper in the game. That can all be a kind of fun thing in and unto itself that is entirely outside the experience per se of just strictly playing the game. And that's what I began to realize is it's like, yeah, like these are two different things. There's playing the game and enjoying the game and having fun with it. And then there is like the competitive pursuit, actively trying to be the very best at the game. And the question arises, is that still fun? Obviously, a lot of people still are having fun with Rivals, but there are also a lot of people who are not having fun with Rivals. And I think that,
I think what makes that even more apparent is that the people that don't have fun with Rivals, it's not like they're gonna make big sweeping videos about it. Go either back to Smash or just play something else.
No, I mean, so if we look at the Rivals of Aether server, right? We've got what, like a couple, like 1,000 people who are in there, and it's coast to coast, and obviously there's a significant number of those people who are still active, right? Not to take anything away from them. However, if we just hop onto Steam charts like right now, and of course Steam charts keeping track of like the concurrent active player base and the number of people who are online in the game at any given moment of time, and we're looking at here. Give me just a moment to actually pull it up so we can get like accurate information to the date. Right, so if we look at it right now, just in the last month, you're averaging, honestly, not bad for an indie game, like, around 500 to maybe 600 players at its peak. So that is not bad. I will give credit where credit's due. That's a lot better than what it was back in 2018, 2016. That's for darn sure. But at the same time, to look at that number and then say, oh, it's constantly growing. Well, the highest peak of all time in the last year for Rivals was like 1,189 players. The lowest, which was after that point, it dipped down pretty recently to like 534, was the lowest after that peak. So I don't know if that peak was maybe a big tournament and a lot of people were whipping out the game again because they were going to compete or something, but I don't think it's a completely honest statement to say that the scene is growing, when it's taken as long as it has, like nearly 10 years the game has been out, to finally reach like a pretty consistently active number. I mean, there were times, back in 2019 and earlier where, gosh, like you were lucky if you logged on and there were 100 people playing online. And again, like something else to take in on board with that is, these numbers are not telling the full story. So there's a significant portion of people who are playing Rivals just for workshop, just for the characters, the Mugen effect of you can play as any character that exists in the game. There's a lot of people who are logging into Rivals right now, I know for a fact, because they know that Rivals 2 is around the corner, and they know that like there's enough elements of the
Might as well
moveset.
get your licks in now.
Yeah, precisely. Might as well like spend some time learning the character and learning their movesets, since a lot of it will translate over to Rivals 2, so that they can be ready for Rivals 2. So even if we look at that number of players now, this 500, 600 players that are logging in this month, the question has to arise, but how many of those players are looking to go into the competitive scene? In any capacity, casually, middling, or seriously, And then of that number, like if you boil it down to the number of people who are actually in it to make a serious bid, you got to believe that that number is going to become even smaller again. So I think the thing again with Rivals is like so many people own the game, and I think you were the one telling me like you had seen the phenomenon among a lot of friends and other people where it's like they purchased the game because it's like, wow, this looks really good, and indeed it is, but when they clock in your 50 hours, maybe 100 hours.
You're 50, probably 100, and then you go back.
Yeah, exactly. You go back to what you know. I mean, for Pete's sakes, like I'm a guy sitting here with 1,600 hours in the game, and I mean, again, like I loved it. I won't say the position of you where it's like, well, I'm apathetic towards Smash Brothers, and I like this, so I will play it. For me, I can honestly say that, yeah, up until like what 2018 or so, 2019, I loved Rivals. Like I truly enjoyed the game, and not just at the casual level, at every level, competitively, everything in between. I mean, that story mode, dear God, but hey, the workshop came out, that was amazing. Like I really did enjoy the game, and to see the way things shifted over time, yeah, it became less enjoyable. And in this case, I wouldn't even go so far as to say that it was the DLC.
I don't.
I would say,
Yeah.
I think that it was.
to
Go for it.
go on that, and I might go on a spiel, but like I don't think I sorry, but I don't think anything changed. I think, and maybe it's not your experience, but it definitely is mine. But I don't
Yeah.
think anything changed. I think it was just I realized what I do like about a certain thing, and it wasn't just about sticking it to the Smash Bros. Man, and it was
Yeah.
generally about finding. And I'm gonna go on a little spiel
Do it.
beforehand,
Go
but
off,
like,
King.
okay, so it's like, of course, and I've said this multiple times before. I was definitely wrong about a lot of things in the video. I don't need to fool anybody into thinking that I'm actually the right person in anything. That I think that's just childish, and I don't want that. I just want everyone to know. My thing is that I finally think I've realized why I don't enjoy Rivals 1 and Rivals 2. And it's mostly because, especially with playing a lot of platform fighters, that it focuses on things that I don't particularly want to focus on. And I think this rings true for most people that wanted to get into Rivals, but is now waiting on Rivals 2. A lot of things
Yeah.
that Rivals focus on, especially when it comes to gameplay, is very meticulous movement and different investments that aren't like traditional platform fighters.
That is a good word
Traditional
for it. Investments.
Yeah, traditional investment, especially with defense and platform fighters, is usually you have a shield. It's either a medium level or a lower level of easy to like get out of things, and like the investment isn't high, but at least you get defense for it. In Rivals, this isn't really the case, especially since a lot of the ways that you get defenses with your side Bs, your up Bs, that is its own thing. And then there's a lack of shields and ledges, so there's not that. So the biggest things that you have is micro movement, and you have parries. And and not the problem, but like the thing about it of why I don't like it so much is because the investments for defense compared to a lot of different platform fighters are not the same for Rivals of
No,
Aether.
not
In Rivals
remotely.
of Aether, in Rivals of Aether, it can sometimes feel like not parries. What is it called? What is it called? It feels like spacing is really off
Yes.
sometimes when
Yeah.
parry is a move and it's so fast. Like
Yes.
and I'm gonna say a game you don't know, but it's fine. You'll understand. I play a game
Go for
called
it.
Stardust Valkyrie. I forgot the
That's right.
character's name. I forgot the character's name, but I'll put it on the screen and I'll probably show you afterward. But like, I like this character, and he's very fair. He's very fair, not in like a competitive sense, but like a lot of his moves have investment for certain things, and he has a lot of range. So basically, what I have to do at a competitive level is that I have to get up, I have to use shield appropriately, inch forward, and then when I got the opponent, I can hit them with one back air and then continue the string on there.
Wow.
Now,
Yeah. Okay.
these are two things that I'm going to say. The first thing is that like I play against Katie, which is like she's like one of the most she's one of the best players when it comes to that game. She's told me that you're still a newish player and you don't know all the combos, but I can definitely tell your neutral is very good. We just gotta get you into combos. We'll put a pin on that. We'll just put a pin on that.
Yeah.
So when you have that, the problem is when you get to rivals, the sort of investment for doing certain things are very different. You don't have a shield. You have parry, and
Yeah.
it's very fast. If you get hit by it, unless it's like a jab, you'll get a punish for it.
Well, and
So
the funny
sometimes
thing about it,
spacing doesn't really like matter as much because it's like
no.
why even hit someone with Sylvanas Tipper if like a lot of the times a person can simply just parry it, you know?
And the funny thing about it is, looking at it at least from what I perceive to be a little bit more of a meta view of the game, like where it's headed when you kind of optimize everything. Parry itself, I mean, yes, technically speaking, is a defensive mechanic from a layman's view, but when you push to the end game where you've got these characters that are just one touch and it's over. It's not
It
just a
becomes offense.
precisely, it becomes accessory to offense, not defense. I
Yeah.
mean, you've got a situation where like people will argue that the movement, right? That's your defense's movement and good spacing, and it's like we had a different name for that in all of the other platform fighters as well as Smash Brothers games, and the name for that was neutral, right? I mean, yes, there are defensive elements to it, but its name is to hint that nebulous space that exists when you're not comboing or shield pressuring, and when you are being comboed or when you are in your shield because of a move that's being thrown out, right? That was considered defense. Movement was just considered that's the neutral, right? That's the filler, if you will.
Yeah, and it's like I think a really good thing about it is like this, right? Tekken would be an entirely different game if it didn't have shields or you couldn't
Yeah,
block at all.
very
And this
different.
is and this and like this is the things of why I don't and I hate that I made that video because I only realize it now by going in playing a game again and like actually giving it more of a chance. But like the things that you have to focus on in order to be good at Rivals of Aether are not things that I like. The
Yeah.
investment aren't like traditional fighters, and like even the defense in that game, like in the defense of that game, when you get hit, every single time you get hit, you can slowly like it's called drift DI. You can like slowly get
Right.
out of moves every single time you get it.
Yeah, you
Even
have some
that as
agency for
even
sure.
yeah, and it's agency, but it's not the agency that I really want.
Well, and even that agency at the meta level, where they have a combo route and they have charted out every conceivable DI that you can do except for out, which is not great, by the way, in a world where you don't have ledges and recovery, depending on the character, especially looking at you, Zetterburn, can be suspect. DIing out in order to escape a combo is not drastically better because now you're in an edge guard situation, and at minimum you're going to be taking a lot of percent to get back on the stage if you don't just die outright.
Yeah, and it's also weird because it's like I play traditional fighters sometimes, right? Like I'm looking right now, Grand Blue
Same.
Fantasy Versus, right? I play that game. I enjoy that game. when I get hit in that game, or like when I get hit in that game, I can usually know because of the defensive tools that I have of the reasons why I got hit. Like I got hit with an overhead. It's like I should have blocked. It's like I shouldn't have made him do that. It's like I get hit with a low high mix up. It's like I should have blocked high. And it's like I'm mashing as soon as I get up. As soon as I get up, I'm mashing. And I just say to myself, yeah, I'm mashing. Like it's really easy, and this goes for traditional platform fighters. For me, it's very easy to pick up what I need to really do right because the tools are already provided for me. So now it's just understanding that bit. And maybe someone can explain this to me, and maybe I'm just wrong. But it's like when I come to Rivals of Aether, I had to get coaches. I've spent money so that I can understand the things that I was doing wrong because I did it for Genesis. I went and I talked to Giga Bowser, and I was just like, "Hey man, you gotta help me because I don't know what I'm doing wrong." And I love my friends, but if I'm gonna go hard, it's very hard for me to realize the things that I want to do when a lot of the defensive options are stripped away from you, and they're instead put on like micro movement, on drift DI, things that I don't want. Basically, Rivals of Aether is not a bad game for what it is, but it's not enjoyable or it's not fun to me because the tools that I have fun or the tools that I can really get great at, it doesn't have. And I think this and again, I hate the fact that I didn't make this. I didn't make that a video. Maybe I'll do it in the future, but I really do think that way. And I think that's the reason why that Rivals 2 is getting so much, not only flack, but getting so many eyes on it. Because I feel as though a lot of people, maybe even Mango feels this way, but I really do feel like a lot of the things that Rivals lacks that we find enjoyable are in Rivals 2, so we're gravitating to that now. It's not about Rivals being an ass game. It's about I don't the things that you want me to focus on, I don't find fun, so I'm gonna wait until Rivals 2 for it.
Well, and I think, and again, to speak, because I mean, certainly this is an experience that I have had as well. I experienced this when I was playing Melee because a lot of people were gravitating more towards, Smash 4, the newer Smash game. And you don't, when you've put a lot of time into something, when you've really invested a lot of time into truly learning, whether it be a fighting game or a platform fighting game, competitively, and you've made that investment, you really it can be a fearful thought to recognize that like you may be looking at a situation where the scene is transitioning or the game is being left behind in some capacity, and the skill set that you've put so much effort in painstaking time into to develop may have significant portions of it or even whole hog aspects of it that are just no longer valid, right? They no longer will bear as much fruit in the meta of what the new game will be, right? And certainly I felt that in myself when people were trying to get me to invest more time into Smash 4 because it was the new thing and it was the scene that was growing and it was the scene that was going to be fresh, and they were all trying to convince me to come over to that. And I kind of stood my ground a bit, but at the same time I felt that pull of like, if I do that, like the things that are competitively viable and valid in terms of your framework and how you think about the game in Smash 4 are completely different from the things that are valid, the way that you think about the game, the things that are viable competitively in Melee. And, to bring that full sort, I mean, I think that, just kind of looking at Smash, I think that like one sport that has a lot of similarities with Smash Brothers, interestingly enough, and I think some of that has to do with shapes, because in every platform fighting game, at least that I know of, until somebody gets big head enough to make the leap into the 3D realm, Shrek Super Slam, and that tiny, minuscule scene. Shout outs to you guys for believing when no one else does. But I think until that time comes, and even then, because it's technically just the 3D version, a cube, right? Every competitive stage and the kind of competitive framework that governs our thinking about the games that we play is a box, right? They said it in the Smash Talk. Every stage is essentially a box, and when you get pushed outside of that box, below it, to the sides of it, or above it, that's how you lose the stock. Well, because of the fact that it's a box, I think there's a lot in common with Smash Brothers, the real-life sport of boxing, right? And actually, fighting games share these elements too. I think there's a certain connotation of like, it is in your best interest in boxing, although you don't want to get hit, right? The sweet science. There is a defensive element there to be aggressive, to score points, right? To land hits. There is an interest in that inherent. There's an interest in trying to corner your opponent, right? There is merit in pushing them into a position where their movement is limited, their ability to retaliate is limited, and your ability is magnified. Your ability to score points and to kind of mount your offense is increased. And the rule set kind of is built in such a way, and the framework of how the sport plays out is built in such a way where it's just naturally almost always a situation where it's like, all right, the guy on the ropes, not in a good spot. Like you were in a bad position, and if things go south much further from where you are now, you will be knocked out, right? The match will be over, and you will not be the winner. You know, and inversely, it's a natural inclination of the people who play the game to want to push people to the edge, right? The corner is not a good place in fighting games, and historically, barring Smash 4 and then Ultimate and kind of the inversion of how some of this works. But even there, to a certain extent, like as a rule, like you do not want the edge to be a place where it's like, oh, well, this is like, there's no consequences for this. Me conceding ground and losing space that I have control of is something that is a good thing. As a rule, you want it to be a situation where it's like, no, like there is risk, and every decision that you make, you know, in between the space of getting on the ropes or off the ropes or in between is something that plays out into the way the meta of the sport or the game is realized. You know, and we admire, I think that like we admire defense the more when you look at somebody who's in a tough spot, whether it be boxing, you got a guy on the ropes, right? I think about the legend himself, right? Muhammad Ali, he's on the ropes. What is he going to do? He's going to rope-a-dope, right? He's going to develop this masterful technique of handling increasingly pressurized offense by using a bad position and figuring out a way of it, right? And we admire him all the more, and like the defense is all the more impressive for the fact that they were able to work themselves out of a position that was a tough spot. The same in Smash Brothers, right? Like, you know, in Melee at least, and I think across all the games, we have an admiration for like Mango especially because of his just unfathomably incredible recoveries, right? So many layers upon layers of ways to get out of a bad position that anybody else in would be dead, right? But somehow he finds the angle. He finds the option they didn't expect. He finds the way to take the hit, but tech it in such a way where he does not die. Like, and that is what you really want. I think, and that's where, you know, if you're in a situation where it's like there's no ledges or, you know, the ledge is an advantage, you almost compare it to boxing. And it's like, well, imagine a world where in the ring, like the moment you get to the ropes, hang on, timeout. Now, give them a second to get off the ropes and back into the center of the ring, and then we'll continue the match. Or inversely, let's make it even worse, where it's like, oh, like there's no hope of recovery from the ropes, right? And it's like the ropes aren't there, and he gets knocked out of the ring. And it's almost like boxing sumo, where you step out of the ring, and now the match is over, right? Like there is a fine line in between, and you want both the offense and the defense to shine. And if the game is given a rule set that is done well, both will have the opportunity to shine.
And again, it's to piggyback off that. It's not to say that Rivals of Aether is a bad game or just like how it's developing is bad. It's just the fact that the defense and things that you usually have and are very understandable and that like promote you to slowly inch for your opponent are gone. So it has to be replaced by other things that it can be enjoyable after 50 hours, but then after a while, it's just like, I want to go back to Shields and Ledges just because they're fundamental tools. I like them a lot. I don't like the way that Drift DI works. And it's just about like, what are you willing? Yeah, what are you incentivizing? And for me, I don't like this incentivization because it's things that I don't care about. I'm not if you gave me Melee right now, I would probably wave dash into my death 7 times. So it's and the reason why I say that is because, you know, micro movement because you don't have a shield. Sometimes you get hit in your toes and it feels really bad.
Well, shield poking is a whole other thing.
Yeah, but with a lack of that, it could really feel bad if you just got like hit by your toes and it looks like it doesn't make any fucking sense and you don't have the tools necessary. It's not about this game being bad. The dance in Rivals 2 looks like it's it's a more enjoyable dance than in Rivals 1.
Yeah. The offense is the greater or the more impressive and enjoyable to participate in because offense has to overcome some defensive tools that are valid and they're strong. And if they're in the right hands, they can be real tough to overcome. Inversely, the defense is impressive and admirable and enjoyable to both play in and watch. Because guess what? Like there are some strong offensive tools, and the person on defense has to actively be thinking about these offensive options that are coming at them at any given moment. And it's because of the fact that they are masterful and they understand how to counteract the offense that their defense is impressive. To make a last point, I'll try to keep it briefer because we've been going. But I think about why is it that we no longer play certain games, or I guess we play them, but maybe we don't have necessarily a competitive scene of any significance to them, right? For games like tic-tac-toe or checkers, right? I think that, at least in the case of tic-tac-toe, at the meta level, we're trying to play this game to win it, the outcome is that it's a draw every time, right? Shout outs to war games. Every meta level game of tic-tac-toe that gets played, it ends in a draw. Well, a draw is that's not a particularly enjoyable experience after a couple of times, and it's not allowing for much room for growth, right? We understand it pretty easily, and when we understand a thing, that's when we kind of are wary of it to a certain extent. And the same can be said of checkers, right? I mean, checkers certainly has more depth than tic-tac-toe, but at a meta level, it often ends in a draw as well. In fact, I think it might even be identical to tic-tac-toe in that at a meta level, it can always end as a draw. So, like, you contrast that to a game like chess. And the thing that's interesting about chess is not only the fact that it still, to this day, has a flourishing competitive scene that is, booming, but the two other things that run adjacent to that, not only does it have a flourishing competitive scene internationally, but it has a very old scene. I mean, chess has been around a long time, and there have been adjustments and rules that have been added into the game in that time that have been made for the interest of preserving the skill set that was valid and ensuring the longevity of the game. But not only does it still flourish at a competitive level, and not only has it been around for a long time, but it's got an active casual scene. You know what? I mean, chess, if you come to chess, and I can speak as somebody who plays as a casual, a miserable, filthy casual, I mean, maybe you wouldn't describe the experience for the top, like the Magnus Carlsens of the world, as fun per se, but they are clearly getting something out of the game. They're clearly enjoying some element of learning the game still, otherwise they wouldn't be playing it, right? The same can be certainly said of the middle group, right? People who are like, I understand the rules of the game, I can beat most any casual, but I'm certainly nowhere near a grandmaster status or even a master status, right? I'm kind of on that journey, or I'm thinking about the game and I'm kind of just trying to learn it, right? And then you can even boil it all the way down to the casual scene, right? I mean, as a casual, like I play chess all the time, I lose all the time. And guess what? I love it's a fun game. There are casual modes that exist for chess. Big chess, where we've got like 6 people playing at a time. 4-way chess.
I remember that one.
Yeah, it's some wild stuff, but it's fun. And the thing that I think is interesting about it is people will talk about competitive games that are balanced well, and then they will talk about playing the game for fun, right? As if these are two completely separate, distinct factors. And what I would suggest is the opposite is true. If the game is built on a good rule set, then the competitive validity of that game will be respected and it will be observed by the community that builds up around it. But at the same time, a game that is enjoyable or that is built well for competition, more often than not, tends to be a game that is enjoyable even if you're not playing it competitively, right? I think the notion of like the casual game or a game built for casual audiences only is a very a contemporary notion, right? Like virtually every game that we look, if we go backwards in time, even all the way back to the Mayans, I think it was, who invented football, as its true name is, or we can use soccer if you want the filthy American variant. But yeah, I mean, it's an ancient game, and very clearly, like the game is built upon a rule set where it's like, yes, like there are skills that we value here, right? Endurance. The ability to handle, the ball and all of these other things, scoring, right? And there are skills that we value less, and we've adjusted and built the rule set around those things. And, I mean, in every game, like the notion of like a game that is not competitive, where? Like, again, I think any game where somebody can win and somebody can lose, there will always be some merit or level of competition that rises up around it. So the question then becomes, how do you build a game well on those merits? How do you design it well? Because if you design it well, don't worry about it will be fun. People will figure out, like, learn the game, and they will find ways to enjoy it in a myriad of different ways, so long as the rule set built around it is good. And I think that's something that every TO needs to take to heart, but it's also something that every developer needs to take to heart. And look back at Rivals. I mean,
It
I'm
makes
very glad that
great
Rivals exists.
games.
Yeah.
It makes great games.
It makes amazing games. I think Rivals is kind of funnily enough, a lot of people will use the phrase about Melee, it's a happy accident. I think the same could be said to some extent of Rivals, because it's very clear if you look at the track record for Dan Frenese, coming from PM and Brawl, then to Rivals, and now Rivals 2, that in some sense Rivals 2 is the game that he was hoping Rivals 1 would be. If it hadn't been for the limitations of that Microsoft Game Maker engine, we may well be looking at Rivals 1 in a completely different light 10 years later. But it's because of the limitations that were around Rivals 1 that we got the system and mechanics that we did, and that we now have the meta that we do. And you know what? It's, on the one hand, you can say that for our part, my position, your position, we are left disappointed in Rivals 1 and hopeful in what can come down the pipeline with Rivals 2. But at the same time, I'm grateful. I'm glad that Rivals 1 exists in the way that it does exist, because if it hadn't come along, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
No.
If Rivals 1 had been built the way that, Rivals 2 looks like it's shaping up.
I probably wouldn't be a YouTuber.
I mean, see, so there we go. And beyond that, like, you look at the games that are yet to come, there are obviously certain decisions for balancing and this, that, and the other that we may appreciate in Rivals 2 that are only being brought to the fore because Rivals 1 exists, right? Rivals 1 might not have had the success that Rivals 2 promises had it not been for Rivals 1, right? I think, what else? And some of the other games that are coming out, Combo Devils, right? Combo Devils is coming out. There's some real interesting mechanics in that game. I think it's got a lot of promise. I don't know if it'll be big, but I know that I'll be playing it.
My forehead is thickening. Why is it not here?
I hope the best for Combo Devils. But you got to ask the question, would we have Combo Devils if it were not for Rivals 1? And even NASB, I feel nothing but sorry for Ludivosity and how they're being absolutely bent over by Game Mill Studios. A classic case of the devs, I think, being buggered over by the publisher again. But
it sucks because I can tell they really tried for NASB.
Oh yeah, I love Slap City. I think Slap City. Who knows what could have happened with Slap City if it had gotten the attention and investment that Rivals 1 did. That keeps me up at night thinking about that one. But no, I mean to look at even that, like, the story's not over, right? I mean, Game Mill is in the picture for now. They may not always be in the picture, right? Or who knows, like, what could happen. NASB may yet have a comeback.
Slap City 2. Slap City 2. That would be some shit. That would be some shit.
I would put some money on that project. You can believe that. But all that to say,
I would too.
We owe it all in some respect to Rivals 1. And Rivals 1 itself owes it all in some respect to Smash. And so these different communities that are, I think we can fall into such dogma and we get so caught up in, like, oh, it's my game and this game needs to be preserved in this way and, purity testing and so on. And it's like, I mean, listen, guys, we're all related in some capacity. And to that end, hold your positions as competitors, as TOs, as casual participants, as spectator participants. But at the end of the day, like, we really need to try and season the situation with some grace and recognize that those of us down here who are still hanging out in that grassroots environment, that grassroots level, we are cut from a different cloth. And I think we view the game in a different light than the folks who are in that sponsor, a backer even, or esport organization intent category, right? I think I see these two entities as separate things. And, I think we've gotten a taste a little bit of what can happen if you allow the esports element of a game to run the show, right? We thirst so hard for the Nintendo sponsorship or endorsement or whatever may have you, whatever money might be made, right? Certainly there are those people too. And it's like, I mean, that's great, but let's not lose sight of the real picture here, that at the end of the day, like, scene is very much in the hands of the community that's built up around that scene. And hopefully the developers choose to participate and enable that, right? And I expect that and nothing less from, like, Frenese and same from the Combo Devils team. And Hopefully in the future, more and more from Game Mill if it's possible, and Ludovosity, I know they will do their part. But I mean, again, like you shouldn't hinge on what the developer does. The community, the game can be great, but it's the community that makes the game kind of into its final product, in a manner of speaking. And
Yeah,
that's
don't let it be an afterthought. Think about just don't let it be an afterthought. People love
do
these
what you
games.
can to make the scene better, man.
I'm trying. I'm trying.
I know. Well, I'm that's
Sometimes we make stinkers along the way.
Hey, and for that you gotta have a little grace. I mean, to look at it, even looking at the games we play, Rivals of Aether. Show me one guy in Rivals of Aether at the top level who hasn't lost probably thousands, at least hundreds of matches against a certain character before finally figuring out the way the matchup works and getting it dialed in, right? The content creators and the TOs, we make mistakes too, but guess what? Like always, to the hope of bettering the scene. And guess what? That next tournament or that next VOD, whatever's coming out, it's going to be the better for the mistake. So hopefully a little bit of grace towards everybody, right? From us to the other perspectives that exist, the competitors and the casuals and the spectators, and if we're lucky, maybe a little bit of that back towards us as well. But that's just the hope. I know it can exist. I've seen it exist before, and I think it exists still in some regards now. But you just got to be wary because we're entering into an interesting era here, and there's a lot of change coming. And there are going to be some people who are really not keen on the change, but there are a lot of people who are also eagerly anticipating. And it's like, we're all part of the same broader scene, and so we got to have a little bit of respect for each other. And first step towards that is having a little grace. That's my 5 cents on that, anyways.
And if they
Being a
don't give us
TO
grace, we'll just spike the hell out of them.
I mean, in game, I will not be gracious, but when we talk in the Discord forums, and when we talk on the YouTube chats and comments, I'll try my best to be gracious. I think,
Oh man.
and to the betterment of the scene for it, I hope, right? But
I
anyways, that's about all I've got to say on all of that. Unless you had something else, I don't have a crazy ton of time left, but
no, I think this has been great, man.
yeah.
Yeah, this has been great.
See, now all
Uh,
we got to do is we got to get Waffles back in here.